Perhaps as we continue with our coverage now, entering the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children campaign period. Now, following the enforcing of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Act, pertinent discussions will be taking place and take a look at the strides that have been taken, but also the various options available in combating the scourge. And so for more on this, Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo joins us this morning to chat further, Director of WISE for Africa. Advocate Brenda, good morning, and thank you for your time here on the SABC at this hour.
Good morning, Lizelle. Good morning to your viewers.
Let's look at the progress to date, perhaps following the total shutdown, the National Strategic Plan as well, even the act that has been enforced. What are some of the key failures in the state's approach to date, perhaps in legislation and just the framework of the plan itself?
So, Lizelle, let's appreciate that the National Strategic Plan was finalized and handed over to government in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I think in April 2021. And remember, once it's handed over to government, they have the responsibility to institutionalize that National Strategic Plan, meaning that almost everything that is contained in that plan needed to be operationalized by the state and its partners, meaning civil society, private sector, development partners, and all, right? It has taken us 3 years really to get to a point where one of the key feature of that plan was the establishment of the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, right? The reason for having that council was to ensure that we coordinate the interventions, the programs, the resources, and we have a central point that ensures that from all layers of government, whether it's national, provincial, local, and mobilizing private sector, mobilizing civil society, that you coordinate all of that so that we then understand the impact that we are making, because we realize that the way we have been approaching the interventions and the programs, we don't seem to know exactly who's doing what and what programs are impactful. So that council was meant to ensure that that happens. So when it receives reports, when it embarks on research, it does so from a position of information. The law establishing the National Council was signed in May this year by the president, right? Yes. Before the elections. I think it was a week before.
Yes.
As of today, whilst we are in the week of World AIDS Day, and we're still observing 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children, that council has not been put in place. So that's a failure. And it's a serious concern, because it keeps on, if we don't put it in place, we are not able to get the impact that we are looking for.
And thank you for painting that succinct picture, because as we shine a spotlight on the various role players, advocacy, community mobilization, litigation, all come to the fore, but also the issues of funding. The exclusion of the funding framework for the National Strategic Plan on GBVF Fund, it's concerning issues of accountability, implementation, and timelines, as you alluded to.
Right.
Unpack that further as well for us, please.
No, true. So what we did was that once the plan was adopted and handed over, it was also costed. So we knew how much it will cost government and all the players in the execution of the plan, right? And it was a 5-year plan, right? We gave ourselves, in 5 years, certain things should happen on leadership, accountability, on prevention, on law and justice, on economic power of women, on research, and then care and support of victims and survivors of gendered violence. So we did cost it. The state has got an obligation, and to date they have not funded fully. The National Strategic Plan. And that's a serious concern because, we take 2 steps forward and then 10 steps back because, people talk about political will. And yes, I don't think there's political will because once you sign something into law, and here I'm really challenging the presidency, that you signed it into law in May, surely you knew that once it is signed into law, certain things must happen. So where are the bottlenecks? Why is it that we don't have this national strategy, the National Council established so that then we do the things that we are supposed to do?
Advocate Brenda, thank you for highlighting those concerns, because there's also an issue when it comes to local and provincial roles within this national framework. Questions about the clarity on that also comes to the fore. But if we're also just going to shine a spotlight on the work that has been adopted by civil society to date, leading up to this enactment of the Act, what are you observing on that front?
So, Lizelle, when the Parliament had a call for submission of people to make comments on the bill at the time. I think for me, what I saw told me what kind of product we are going to get at the end, right? Because it was a rushed job, but also, there was no from the portfolio committee that was seized with this bill at the time, really did not apply its mind, right? So there were many submissions. Civil society made a case for ensuring that it's got a provincial element to it, so that then you don't have provinces saying they can't do this, they can't do that. Remember, if you're looking for coordination, you are bringing everybody into the pot. So it's not just national government on top dictating to the provinces and local government. They need to be part of the planning, the design, the implementation, and the execution. So in the rashness of when portfolio committee rushed this bill, they missed a key element, being the involvement of provinces and how you bring them into this bill and now this law, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so that's part of the challenge, because civil society organizations have now decided to stand up and say you cannot implement this act or this law in this manner, in the way that is designed and structured, right? Because it's going to have serious implications, right?
Yes.
And that's an issue. And now that you have signed into law, and they were warned, by the way, right?
Brenda, I'm going to have to come in there. It seems like there are still more questions and answers at this point, and the roadmap going forward is what needs to be charted. Let's leave it there. Thank you for your time and for being part of this conversation. Starter Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo, Director of Wise for Africa, this morning, chatting about some of the challenges. This is, of course, as we enter 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children, period. So we'll leave that conversation there.